this is Christina Caudill, and this is your lesson on Uranus in Taurus through the houses. So what we're going to talk about today is looking at the transit of Uranus entering Taurus and the houses in the natal chart that you'll be experiencing this in. So as Uranus has already been in Aries, as it ingresses Taurus, we tend to notice a significant shift because Uranus is one of those planets. It's a slow mover. It can take, many years to go through a sign. It's just been in Aries for about 8 years. It'll have an 8-year transit through Taurus, right? So these are some major themes that we start to see shift in our world. And of course, Uranus is the great awakener. And a lot of times, the Uranus effect is the element of surprise. It's things that sort of maybe catch us off guard or have us on our toes, that sort of thing. And, in modern astrology, we don't tend to limit the delineations with any particular planet as good or bad because we can see them in many dimensions, right? Because of your worldview or of your perspective, but also, like Uranus can be windfalls of money, or it can be, sudden like loss of money or something like that, especially because we're looking at Taurus that rules things like money. So it can just at the end of the day be effects that help us to awaken to the evolution that needs to take place. The sign of Taurus, wherever it is in our chart, we're going to find a sense of, which tends to be where we limit ourselves, where we want safety and peace and security, right? Taurus is the sign of values, what we truly value. It's an earth sign. So it tends to be, and it's a fixed earth sign, right? So it's the ultimate in fixed energy. And so we tend to want to resist change in the Taurus area of our chart. So with Uranus, which is all about change, evolution, breakthrough, it can be uncomfortable because this is an area of our chart and our life where we generally are saying, wait a second, I don't want change here. But the Uranian change is one that really ultimately is for us to have a fresh start, right? It doesn't matter how old we are. Life and karma and the universe, no matter what age, come to us with opportunities. And Uranus is always some kind of opportunity knocking. And again, sometimes Uranus can be traumatic events that sideswipe us, that catch us off guard, or they can be sudden realizations that something needs to change. And so the best way to handle Uranus energy, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of insights throughout this course from the other astrologers, but I've found that the best way is to be open to change. Expect change if you can. And try to just go with the energy of change because, with a planet like Uranus, change is inevitable. But growth is optional. If we take the invitation to change and to grow from it, we're really reaping the most benefits from this transit of Uranus. So follow along with the worksheet. What you'll want to do is look at your chart and see where Uranus is transiting. So as Uranus shifts from Aries to Taurus, it's probably most likely in the house of your chart that Aries still rules. And as it shifts to Taurus, it may still be in that house, but Taurus will probably rule the next house that it's in, so it just depends on what house system you use. As I said in the worksheet, for evolutionary astrology, we tend to use the Porphyry house system. So just maybe look at your chart through the lens of the Porphyry house system. If you're using something like whole sign houses or whatever, then you'll get a very different view because, you know, say the Taurus house is the house Taurus rules. But if you're using any other type of house system, you may see some bleed over between houses, you know. So if Uranus is transiting your first house in Aries and it shifts to Taurus, you may start seeing sort of reverberations in both, still the first house, but then also the second house, because that's the house that Taurus rules, right? So we look at the house that Uranus is transiting in, the house that Taurus rules, and we also want to look at our natal Uranus. You know, what house is it in? What sign is it in? That also has like a reverberation when we have something significant like Uranus changing signs. Another thing we might want to look at is your Aquarius house also, because Uranus rules Aquarius in modern astrology. So there tends to be a reverberation there as well, right? So this is kind of like putting it all together, like the big picture. Now, if you're just new to astrology and you're just learning for the first time, you can just stick to looking at where is Uranus right now transiting in your chart. So that would be where Taurus is, 0 degree Taurus in your chart. And so we'll go through the different houses and see what the Uranus effect may be when Uranus enters Taurus. Okay, so first of all, Uranus is the planet that disturbs and transforms. All of the outer planets are actually considered planets that disturb and transform. But especially Uranus, because it's the Great Awakener. And it is meant to shatter our expectations, shatter our ideas. I often see it, you know, if there's like a Uranus, you know, something happening either with Mars or maybe you have some significant Uranus activity. I've literally seen people like shatter a glass or have their, you know, shatter a window or something like that. That's so Uranian, because it's like there's something that needs your attention. And when we think of Taurus, as I said, Taurus is where we resist change. So when we start with the first house, if you have Taurus in your first house, then you have some fixed ideas about who you are, about how you present yourself to the world. You know, the first house, the ascendant, is the mask we wear to the world. And when Uranus shifts to Taurus, or when Uranus transits this first house in Taurus, there could be some dissatisfaction with how you're showing up in the world, you know, or with how people are perceiving you to be. And that needs to change. Sometimes it changes in dramatic ways. I mean, sometimes people even change their name. You know, I've seen that happen, or change their business name, or, you know, drastically change their look. And it can also be just this dissatisfaction with any constraints of who you feel yourself becoming, or who you truly genuinely are, you know, because ultimately Uranus is about that genuineness, that authenticity, even if it means alienating yourself from other people, even if it means, you know, looking different and acting different and talking different and all this, but your impulse is to truly be authentic. You know, and again, with Taurus, you may have had some fixed ideas about who you are in the world, you know, and people respond to this identity of yours. So they've always, you know, expected to be the same. And now Uranus is coming through saying, I need to break free from my normal identity. And sometimes this means breaking free from relationships, right? Because the opposite sign is the 7th house. But ultimately, it is a sense of freedom, sometimes physical freedom, like just getting out and feeling free. Anything that physically restrains you, you're going to have a sense of, I need to be free. And, you know, again, it can affect relationships, or it can simply be like, this is who I am. Now you deal with it, you know? not compromising. That's one thing about Uranus and Taurus in general. Taurus is stubborn, right? And when Uranus comes along, then it can awaken that sense of stubbornness once you realize what it is that is the authentic piece that needs to come through, that authentic identity that truly is yours to express. Okay. So Uranus in the second house. So the second house is Taurus's natural house, right? It's the house of values. Ultimately, it's our values. What do we value the most? And as a coach myself, there's an exercise that I learned early on that is so valuable with anytime I work with clients, is I get them to list like their top 5 values in life. What you value the very most in your life. And then we start looking at how much are you actually prioritizing these values in your life. And the ways you can look at that is where you're spending your money, look at your checkbook, your bank statement, how you're spending your time, look at your calendar, and where your focus is. And so when we look at these things, then a lot of times people can find that what they say they value in life, they're not really living that. Like say you think that your family is the utmost importance, you put it above everything else, but your time and money are showing you that that's not true. Maybe you're valuing other things, assuming that your family knows that you value them, that kind of thing. Or maybe it is that you value what you're learning, your spirituality, your spiritual quest. But are you really actually dedicating your time and your resources to that spiritual quest? Whatever that value system is, this is a time to start focusing on it, open it up to change. Maybe maybe you've always valued being a mom and then your children leave the nest or something like that, where the values then need to change. Maybe it's even beyond your decisions, but life shifts and your values change. The second house is traditionally about money and possessions and resources. And when we think about possessions, that which we hold on to and cling on to, and Taurus is definitely the sign that can, cling on to things because it wants that steadiness. When Uranus comes around, it's going to ask you to liberate from these things. And it can be like, maybe you always felt you weren't materialistic, you turned your back on materialism, and then suddenly you're awakened to the joys of, luxurious living or something like that, or earning a lot of money, or it could be the opposite. Maybe you've always felt like you could earn money, but then that starts to feel stuck and maybe not satisfying enough. So finding new ways to be satisfied in ways that have to do with your values in life, so we may be looking at our money in terms of how we earn it, how we can utilize it in the best way. Uranus also represents upgrades, right? Like, how are we going to upgrade how we perceive of our money, our earning ability, that type of thing? Do we need to hire a money coach? Do we need to actually focus more on our finances? And just in general in the world, that this is a big theme, our actual money. I mean, one of the things, the whole Bitcoin craze, even though that was initiated during Uranus and Aries, we expect it to be a theme that we'll continue to see anything around our society's values in general, but specifically around money and resources, natural resources. Hopefully we'll find ways that we can accelerate and more efficiently, is the word I was looking for, more efficiently use our resources so that we're not taking so much from the earth. And if you have Uranus in the second house in Taurus, look at ways to be more efficient with your resources in general, because resources, money, possessions, they're all tied together, as is your self-worth, right? Maybe if you've always been someone to tell yourself, oh, I'm fat, oh, I'm this, oh, I'm that, just not really valuing yourself. And maybe the way that you speak to yourself needs to change. Maybe you'll have that sudden realization, I can't speak to myself in this way. It's not loving, because self-love and self-worth are the realm of Taurus and the second house. Okay, so we'll move on to the third house. The third house is about communication, right? And so with Taurus there, we may have some fixed ideas about the world and about who we are in the world, and just in general, our world, the world that we live in, because with the third house, communication, what are we communicating? We're communicating our needs. We're communicating about our reality. And with Uranus there, that can really shift things. So if you've been having Uranus in Aries in the third house, maybe you've gotten a little fiery with your communication and your beliefs. And as Uranus enters Taurus, maybe instead of that fire, it needs some earth. It needs some conviction. Again, there's that stubbornness. Again, there's that tenacity of Uranus in Taurus, right? And so your ideas still may need to shift and open up and change, but it's like the Taurus energy is saying, I want to know where I stand. And Uranus in, this is actually Mercury's house, right? Mercury's natural house of Gemini. And so it's about learning, finding new ways of learning. Maybe there's a way, maybe you feel like you need to learn more, but things like books really just put you to sleep or something like that. Maybe there's a way you can start satiating your curiosity in ways, maybe you need new ways of learning. I know myself, I'm an audio learner. I learn best through listening. And so whenever I can, I try to learn that way because that's the best way that I learn. And you may find that maybe there is a way that you've felt that you easily learned, and now this is calling for an upgrade or a change in some way. Sometimes we may feel with Uranus in the third house that we have learning issues, learning disabilities or something like that. And it's because we're not honoring how we best learn. Some people need to learn by example. Some people are visual learners. So just be thinking about what it takes for you to learn. And ultimately, with Uranus in Taurus in the third house, your fixed ideas are shattered, and maybe they need to be shattered. And suddenly you may become a student again. No matter where you are in your career, maybe there's more learning for you to do in order for you to really grasp these new ideas that are coming through. And, with this third house, Mercurian sort of energy, whereas the opposite house, the ninth house, is about belief. The third house is about, I need to know why and how and the details. So this can really help to waken up your curiosity. And be open to things like abstract ideas, right? Because Uranus is about the abstract. We might not always know how to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Like say, for instance, when you're learning astrology, there's so much to learn that it's not always taught in like step one, leads to step two, leads to step three, leads to step four. Sometimes you need to just like learn a little piece here, another little piece there, and one day it will all just click and come together. So just being open to learning in new ways. Again, open to abstract ideas, be open to paradox, because really ultimately brilliance and genius is about paradox, not filling in the entire picture together, but really getting just enough so that you know that there's more to learn. So the fourth house is the house of the private self, home, roots, family, and ancestry. So Uranus in the fourth house. Now, a lot of times that we see a move of house, you can actually literally move house. Last summer, I had Uranus transiting my Aries IC, and we moved 3 times in one summer. Well, we moved twice in one summer, but I had like 3 different homes. And I knew we were moving. I knew there was nothing I could do about it. I didn't want to move. We were living right on the beach. But I said, well, I'm going to open to it because this is what's happening. This is what Uranus is bringing us. And even though Uranus is about the element of surprise, I knew we were moving. What I didn't realize, we would have such a hard time finding a place. That's why we had to move twice, because we had to move in with my dad until we could find a place. And it took us a while. And that was frustrating. And I didn't know where we were going to be, but I just knew that this was what needed to happen. So with Uranus entering your fourth house, if your fourth house is Taurus, again, Taurus wants that steadiness, that safety, that rootedness, probably really doesn't want to move. And it doesn't necessarily mean you will move house. You could maybe upgrade your house. You could maybe do some kind of renovation around the house. Uranus to the IC a lot of times has to do with changes in the family. It could be births, deaths, adoptions, anything that sort of changes the family dynamic. And again, this is an 8-year transit in the sign. So these are changes that are ongoing. But when we first see the ingress, we may first notice these signs. So whenever Uranus is on the IC, we really see that a sense of uprootedness. And as Uranus transits through the fourth house, again, how we relate to the family dynamic, the family origin changes. But we also want to remember that the fourth house is our private self. It is opposite of the 10th house being our public self. And so the fourth house is how we relate to ourselves, our internal sense of integrity, our relationship with ourselves. And we'll get more into the 10th house later, but that's the public self, the public image, what people who don't know us well think about us, their opinion of us. Our fourth house is about our opinion of us. Do I like myself? Am I a good person? How can I be a better person type of thing? How can I be a better mom or daughter or member of my tribe or family? These are some of the things that may be coming up during this time. Uranus in the 5th house is about taking risks, right? We know the 5th house is about joy and creativity, and ultimately it's about taking risks. Now, risks isn't something in the realm of Taurus normally, right? Again, Taurus wants peace and security and everything to just stay the same, but that's where we can feel really stuck. See, that's the thing, is with Uranus entering the earth sign of Taurus, we can really feel dissatisfied and restless. And then that restlessness can reach a peak, and then, a sudden change may occur. If we can start to notice the restlessness and say, where can I bring some freshness and some experimentation into this area? And again, the 5th house, the house of risk, it's the house of creativity, what we do when we are creative. And it can be anything, whether you're, someone who is a corporate type, or even if you're retired, that's the best time to say, how can I align with my Leo creativity and my special destiny? You know, the fifth house is also romance and sex too, and anything we do for joy and pleasure. Taurus loves to do things like work with the earth and work with, you know, gardening and even nourishing, good food, good wine, things like that, luxury. Maybe it's time to actually release that need for luxury and for beauty in your life and in your home. You know, maybe renovating your home so it looks like a sanctuary, or that it looks like a luxury hotel or something like that. This is a time for you to be more free in that which brings you joy. It could be, you know, where you want to take a risk in love and in play. Maybe for a long time you've put that off. You know, you've been really responsible. And now Uranus is coming into Taurus saying it's time to have some fun, to play without the guilt, to start, you know, pampering yourself again. I think everybody loves that word, right? Who doesn't love to pamper themselves? And so this could be a time for you to just wake up that area of your life. I think it sounds great. Now, Uranus in Taurus in the sixth house. The sixth house being Virgo's natural house. It's the house of health and healing, of being of service. Now, we often associate Virgo in the sixth house is perfectionism. And so Uranus is coming in here saying it can blow some of that out of the water. You know, maybe your daily life just gets so, you know, unexpected changes happening. You can't keep up with them. And perfectionism, it has to go out the window. It just becomes being able to keep your head above water with all the work. Sixth house can be about work, daily tasks, a lot to do. And it's about being of service, the humble servant. You know, Uranus can be having you reframe that. Maybe instead of being humble, maybe you can have some more excitement in how you work and in your daily life, in your daily routine. The sixth house also has to do with things like morality, your moral choices, especially in the area of work. And when we think about our moral choices in work, so sorry about that. I had to pause for a second. I had a disturbance. I have Uranus going through my fourth house. So there's always disturbances around the home. But so Uranus in the sixth house, we want to look at our moral choices around work, how we interface with moral dilemmas, you know, and it might not just be in the realm of work, but, you know, sixth house, we tend to think of work. You know, maybe you're faced with some sudden dilemmas where you being authentic may be seen as some people as some kind of, you know, moral departure from what society says is correct. Maybe moral can be like kind of a heavy word, but it can be about making choices and decisions that are authentic to what you feel is right. So just be kind of on the lookout for that as well. You know, as we know, the sixth house is health and healing. It could be sudden healing crises. It could also be healing, sudden healings that are unexpected, like a spontaneous healing, right? So looking at ways of using alternate healing, right? Alternative healing. That's something that Uranus is, you know, Uranus is about the alternative. So maybe there's alternative ways of healing the mind, body, spirit connection. Uranus in the seventh house in Taurus. Okay, so seventh house is relationships, marriages, partnerships of all kinds, contracts of all kinds. And these may need to be renegotiated. We see a lot of times, maybe there's a couple that has a Uranus, transiting their seventh house, and maybe they weren't married and they suddenly get married, I mean, it can also show breakups. Maybe there's a couple that something comes to a crisis and Uranus separates, because Uranus can have that separative effect. It doesn't necessarily always mean that, though. It could mean some kind of a shift, some kind of a renegotiation, right? Because seventh house is about negotiation. Maybe you think that, we're either have to be married or we're living in sin, and maybe Uranus comes around with a third option. Uranus is the option that we didn't think we had. And so when we look at Uranus in the seventh house, maybe you find that your partner that you always thought was a certain way, maybe they're going through some kind of Uranus transit, and suddenly you feel like, I don't know this person. Who is this person? What kind of identity crisis are they going through that I now have to adjust around? What in my relationship has been stuck? That's Taurus. That just is no longer life-giving to the relationship. Finding ways of giving life, of breathing life, of even reinventing your relationships, your partnerships, your contracts, your relationships, even with your clients, how you interact with them. Groundbreaking new ways of connecting with people. That it can be one of the positive sides of the seventh house, because ultimately, when we're going through our own changes, others have to readjust to that as well. And maybe sometimes people don't really like that, right? Uranus in the seventh house, oftentimes the seventh house is an influence that we're having to deal with rather than coming from ourselves, right? So just looking at your relationships, are you giving them enough room to breathe? Are you adding enough excitement so they still feel fresh and new and like we're going somewhere, right? Because Uranus wants to feel like it's always evolving and moving toward the future. So see how maybe you can bring that sort of element into your relationships. Now, Uranus in Taurus in the eighth house. The eighth house is about our deep bonds, right? When if the seventh house is marriage, then the eighth house, they say, is like the wedding night, right? It's consummating the marriage. It's also opposite the second house. The second house is my resources, my possessions, what I do for my survival. And the eighth house is what I rely on others to do to contribute to us as a couple, or to contribute to our joint survival. So it's joint finances, the income of the partner, that type of thing. Now, it's even bigger than that. The eighth house isn't just about a relationship or sex or a bond, but it's also that which shapes us, right? It's these deep emotional experiences that shape us, because ultimately this is the house of the occult. It's the house of power, empowerment, and disempowerment. This is Scorpio's natural house. And so Taurus could have some fixed ideas in this house that need to be refreshed, or need to be shattered, or need to be broken up so something new can come through. The eighth house can sometimes be these experiences that are the dark nights of the soul. These are these rock bottom experiences that put us in touch with the metamorphosis that we're here to experience in this life. Sometimes we deal with the death of a loved one. Sometimes we deal with the death of what we thought was our own identity, or what we thought we wanted in life. It's all kinds of endings in certain ways. And Uranus can put us into sudden realization with how we deal with endings. And even maybe near-death type of experiences, right? Where we we touch the eternal. Because again, this is the house that is beyond the veil. Actually, I think all the water houses have some of the symbolism, but especially the 8th and the 12th. This is another one of the houses of the subconscious. It's the hidden part of our life that maybe we sort of like, it's like the basement where we can like throw a lot of our deep, dark secrets and things that we don't necessarily think we want to deal with. Our deepest desires, even our sexual desires, are all kinds of taboo desires, taboo that's labeled by society. And Uranus can come and say, I want to release that. It's time to just shift any kind of taboos. And, Taurus is about the, sexuality when it comes to the self, and often keeping it private. But when it's in the 8th house, Scorpio's house, which Libra risings will probably have, there is something there about shattering your self-focus so that you can open up to connect with others, to connect with your deep emotional and sexual needs. Right? So this is a very kind of potent, anything scorpionic, maybe I think this way because I'm very scorpionic, but the 8th house, again, that's the Scorpio's natural house. Uranus wants you to wake up this area. Again, similar to the 5th house, it's about taking risk. It's about going where maybe you've denied yourself or denied your needs, and suddenly waking up this area and saying, I have needs. And there's areas of my life that I need to explore, even if they were beyond my reach or beyond even my conscious mind. So the 8th house, again, that can be dealing with things like, they say it's sex, death, and other people's money. Those are like the sort of key words for the 8th house. But at the end of the day, it's these deep experiences that shape us on an emotional depth level. And now when we get to the 9th house, that's the house of the higher mind, right? It's opposite the 3rd house. So if the 3rd house is Mercury's house, right, which is like sort of the knowledge and wanting to understand the world, the 9th house, which is Jupiter's house, Sagittarius's house, is about the wisdom, right? The belief systems. It's the house of the spiritual quest. So Uranus entering here is saying it's time to get moving on this quest. Now, if you have Taurus in this house, in 9th house, again, Taurus is very fixed. Might not ever want to leave home, might know that, oh yeah, there's a beautiful big world out there, but that's for other people to explore. Well, maybe Uranus comes along and says it's time to get out, get moving, explore, stop resisting your need to explore more of the world of ideas that can really open your mind, expand your mind and your learning and your teaching. I mean, 9th house is the guru house. The house of the teacher, the house of the wise master. Maybe you come in touch with that. Maybe you go back to school, like to a university degree or something like that. It is the house of university, higher learning, and foreign travel, foreign lands, anything that's exotic and foreign to us. It's also the house of legal issues. You could have sudden legal issues that, again, they can be great windfalls of luck. Something gets suddenly resolved, or they can be things that kind of sideswipe you and take you on the unexpected. We don't exactly know, but we just know that the shifts that are happening have to do with your beliefs, and your aspirations as well. It's your long-term vision of the world, right? So we can have a long-term vision and think one day I'll get to it. And Uranus is like, it's time. It's time to get excited about the future and my vision, and just follow that, even if it means, ridicule by others. Even if people think you're too old to go back to school, or or don't have enough knowledge to be a teacher or a guru. Other people's opinions matter little to Uranus. Uranus is saying break free from your fixed ideas. Again, that's Taurus, having something fixed belief systems, and open up to some true brilliance that is the deep truth. And as we've said with Taurus can also be about being very stubborn. Maybe again that you've been experimenting with your spirituality and different ideas, maybe even your political ideas. And then as Uranus shifts to Taurus, you start to say, you know what I know, and I'm going to be very sure about my beliefs about the world. And then maybe that you become the teacher and you become the guru. Now, Uranus entering the 10th house, so crossing the midheaven, we know that is about your public life, right? It's opposite the 4th house. And so the 10th house is your public image and your career or your career direction. Maybe you shift direction suddenly. I have Uranus in the 10th house myself natally. And I have shifted careers a lot in my life when I felt very dissatisfied or very limited, because Uranus wants liberation and authenticity and a cause and a purpose. And if you don't have all of these in your career, it may be time to shake things up. It can also be the agent of transformation in your career field. Maybe everyone else in your career field is doing things like it was like 1990 or something. Maybe they haven't caught up to the technology. Maybe they resist Taurus, any kind of advancement or evolution. And maybe you can be the one to bring that. Maybe you are the Uranus influence in your career field. Shattering paradigms, shattering other people's expectations of a career path, bringing people into the future and bring, corporations or something into the future. Maybe you're the one to help to elevate and innovate in your career field. We also look at, the satisfaction. Maybe you've been climbing a certain mountain that's, with Taurus, which is that very earth sign in Capricorn's natural house. Maybe you spent your whole career climbing a mountain and, you're about ready to get to the peak, or you've gotten to the peak. And Uranus says, you know what? This is the mountain I want to be on. I don't even want this mountain anymore. This mountain doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have any value, right? So it's coming back to what's the real value in all of my efforts for achievement and for recognition, because all of that needs to change once Uranus comes along and zaps your 10th house. So Uranus in the 11th house, the 11th house, it's another house of our aspirations, similar to the 9th house. The 9th house tends to be about our spiritual aspirations. The 11th house is our aspirations in the world, through our career, through who we are publicly. And we also know the 11th house to be about groups, It can even sometimes be like groups of families, like what the family thinks about you, but it's generally like networking groups that are together for like a cause, groups of people, of friends, say. And Uranus tends to alienate, like the Uranus sort of influence can often be one of alienation. You may find yourself alienated from the group. Maybe you look around and think, who are these people? Like, I don't know them. We don't speak the same language. We're totally on a different belief system. They all believe this, but I know the truth is somewhere else here. And so it can be that shift. And maybe, maybe you say that you just don't resonate with the people you've been surrounding yourself with. There's that quote that we are, our identity is built around the connections we make, and like the 5 people we spend the most time with, we take on a lot of their belief systems and identity and culture. And if the people you surround yourself with aren't who you really are, who you are becoming, then that may shift, that may need to shift. The 11th house is about being groups of people that are together for a cause. Maybe you're the one, maybe that means refreshing your group so that people are inspired and people are moving toward a cause. Again, in Taurus, the 11th house, can really be fixed with your friends and your community and your groups. Maybe you've been on a board for like forever and so long, and you're the one that comes along and says, it's time to raise money, it's time to get with the program and actually start to evolve our purpose, our joint cause. Again, you could be that Uranian element to shake up groups and friends, to breathe life into the purpose of the group. And Uranus in the 12th house. This is Pisces' natural house. If you have Taurus there, usually that's the sign that, of a steady sort of private self. Well, I don't even want to say private. It's more of subconscious, the subconscious self. Maybe you hadn't, depending on what else planets are in there, but, maybe it's not something that you feel is a very rich part of your psyche, your subconscious. Well, Uranus will change that. A lot of times Uranus going through the 12th house, we can have trouble sleeping. This is the house of sleep. It can take extra effort to get a good night's sleep. You may be just disturbed by these stirrings going on in your subconscious. It could be around guilt. It could be around survival anxieties, things like that. This is where you really may want to seek some help on a subconscious level, whether it be through, painting or artwork or dream work. Actually would probably be the best thing, which is sort of an abstract way of looking at your dreams, and really mining for what's really there, what's your subconscious saying. I believe it was Jeffrey Wolf Green that said that Uranus in the 12th house, we can suddenly have these like ideas that just seem so crazy to us. And maybe we blurt them out, or they just come out of us. And the thing is to not repress that which needs to come through. It's kind of like Carl Jung's Red Book, when he broke with Freud, and he just was on the brink of like madness. Well, he actually did go mad by some people's view. And he just started creating and drawing and creating all these stories. And some of them were really twisted and disturbing and everything. But it was just something in him that needed to come out, this darkness. So anytime we deal with the 12th house, we want to analyze it and figure it out. What does my dream mean? What's it telling me? Sometimes dreams are actually prophetic. Maybe they do tell you, go check that mole out because it's cancer or something. But a lot of times they're more abstract than that. A lot of times they're simply processing emotions that haven't been thoroughly and efficiently and effectively processed. So, this could be a time for psychotherapy or really even that type of work, astrology, looking at yourself on a whole other level that involves mythology, that involves storytelling, that gets you out of the linear thinking, right? Because the 12th house is they say the area like the back of the head. We just can't see it. No matter how much we like try to find, we can never see the back of our head, right? Unless we hold up like a mirror to it. And, so finding just different ways of getting a glimpse of what is going on in our subconscious and how it may be manifesting. And so, Uranus in the 12th house, this is the ultimate house that has all of the lessons from the entire, karmic journey within it. And so that can really be a transit that you want to be gentle with yourself and really find ways to calm the self. Go to the ocean, drink lots of water, eat clean food, do energy work. This is really the time to try to find calm, but be open to the change, open to the awakening. So no matter where Uranus is transiting in your chart, you really know that this shift, again, around May 15th, and it's going to be intense because Mars is squaring it, so we'll especially see it. And then we'll also have Mercury conjunct Uranus. So we'll get the messages from Uranus. We just want to know that while Uranus can be about shocking events, sudden insights, sudden awakenings, things that maybe we don't feel ready for, but just allowing ourselves to be ready, knowing that this is a cycle that must take place. And the other thing is because we are a community in the New Paradigm community, we're over 1,000 members. We want to definitely know that we are here to support each other. We're here to learn from each other. Make sure you reach out, make some friends in the Facebook group or on the community forum. Even if it's just online friends, that's very Uranian, right? That's very Aquarian. I think it's really important to know that we are a group that is here to support each other through these shifts. So I hope you got what you needed today and understood a little bit more about the Uranus transit through the houses. Be sure to check out the workbook and fill out the worksheet so that you can always refer back to what your Uranus transit has to teach you, and continue to complete it with some ideas as you start to see how this influence will unfold in your life and in the collective, because Uranus is about the collective experience. So while we can experience it privately, we're also connected to this greater network of human beings that are also experiencing this Uranus shift. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the New Paradigm community. All right, see you soon. Bye.